The gap.
February 24th, meeting of the Metropolitan Transit Commission. My name is Lee Altman, County Commissioner serving at large. And at this time, I would like for all the voting members of the MTC to please introduce themselves. Starting with you, please.
Brad Simmons, Mayor of Mint Hill.
And also your manager who's with you.
Brian Welch, Town of Mint Hill.
I'm David Phillips, the new mayor of Pineville. My manager is supposed to be here. I don't know if he's in traffic, but so this is my first time attending an MTC meeting. I was just recently elected. Just to give you a little information, prior to this, I had served 14 years on town council and had taken about a 4-year break. And then when Jack Edwards decided not to run again, I was asked by several residents to at least run and give it a try. So fortunately, I was nominated. So I'm here tonight learning every minute. So bear with me, but I look forward to this opportunity. Thank you.
We're thrilled you're here. Welcome.
So welcome. I'm Vi Lyles, and I serve as mayor of the city of Charlotte.
Hello, John Higdon, Mayor of Matthews.
Well,
Tony Lathrop, NCDOT. I'm both the Division 10 representative and the finance chair for the full board.
and we'll go back around to the other people in the room, but let me get the remaining voting members. We have some coming in remotely.
Yes, I have Commissioner Gardner.
Commissioner Garner. Yeah, I didn't think, yeah. 'Cause, so online, our voting members, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Rusty Knox, Mayor of Davidson.
Glad to see you.
Mayor
Hope you're feeling better.
I'm Mayor Woody Washam, Mayor Cornelius.
Thank you. And then we'll go back around for people who are not voting members, but members of but attending here as a part of our meeting. You can go first.
Good evening, Jared Herms, former chair of TSAC, now former vice chair of TSAC, now chair of TSAC.
Brent Cagle, interim CEO, CATS.
Brad Thomas, City Attorney's Office.
And then online.
Randy Gates with the City of Gastonia.
Bill Thunberg, LNTC, Mooresville.
All right. I think, Anthony, you may be on mute. I think you're still on mute, but we do welcome the town of Huntersville. And sorry that Mayor Christy Clark can't be with us tonight, but we're also really excited for her to be joining the MTC. Anybody else?
Al Javoslawski, Cabarrus County.
Okay, Andrew?
Andrew Grant, Town Manager, Cornelius.
Is that everybody? Okay, I think that's everybody. And one more member joining our table right now. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry, Jeff Parker, and Chairman of CTAC.
Thanks so much. Before I begin, I would like to make a brief statement on the passing of Mayor Walker Reid of Gastonia. Since our last meeting, many of us were shocked to hear of his passing. His death is a tremendous loss, not only for the city of Gastonia, but for the entire Charlotte region as a whole. Mayor Reid's unwavering love for the city of Gastonia was unmatched. His work and insight and contributions to the commission and the entire Charlotte region was vital to the progress we have made in ensuring that our plans and goals have the support of regional partners. A lifelong public servant, Mayor Reid spent 22 years serving as mayor pro tem and city councilman before being elected as the city's mayor in 2017. Mayor Reid was later reelected to a 4-year term in 2019. He was a pioneer and a compassionate leader who was truly passionate about service to his people. His contributions were not limited to public service. Prior to his retirement, he served as an assistant fire marshal and fire and life safety educator of 23 years for the Mecklenburg County Fire Marshal's Office. This is just a snapshot of his many contributions, but I wanted to make sure that we took some time out to honor him today. I ask that we continue to keep Mayor Reid's widow and family in our prayers as they continue to deal with that immeasurable loss. Okay, so at this time, we will turn to some appointments that we need to make, beginning with Vice Chair of the Metropolitan Transit Commission. So if there's anyone who'd like to put themselves forward or make a nomination, please speak up now.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a nomination. This is Mayor Washam, and I'd like to nominate Mayor Rusty Knox as Vice Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other nominations? Hearing none. All in favor of appointing Mayor Knox as Vice Chair of the Metropolitan Commission, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
And the motion passes. Congratulations and thank you, Mayor Knox. Next.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, and would you like to say anything?
I'm sorry I'm not in attendance.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said thank you for that vote of confidence. I'm sorry I'm not in attendance, but I look forward to getting back at the dais.
Absolutely. We hope you feel better soon. All right. So the second item on our agenda is the CARPO appointment. And could I ask you, sir, to give us a little background on where we are with that, and we can make some choices.
Yes, so the MTC has one representative of the MTC on CRTPO. Now, the oddity or the complexity on this is if you are a representative representing your jurisdiction, your town, you cannot also be the MTC representative, right? So you can't be both at the same time. So that does mean, and Mayor Higdon has served in that role, I believe, for the last 3 years. And so that is limiting to who can serve in that role from the MTC as the MTC member. And that's the complication.
So can you tell us who from the MTC are eligible to serve on CARPO?
Yes, so obviously Mayor Higdon is eligible.
Because I'm already serving in my own capacity, and I don't know if anybody else is. Okay.
Mayor Simmons.
So,
I believe Mayor Clark could as well.
okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess the first question would be, is there anyone who has an interest, who has an interest? Let's start there. So,
Happy to do it.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend that we nominate Mayor Higdon to serve as our representative. I think it's a great thing about the continuation of what they're doing, and he certainly has the qualifications to do that, so.
Thank you.
Second that if needed.
excellent. It's been moved and seconded that Mayor Higdon be appointed as MTC's representative to CARPO. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. I spoke with Jason Lawrence earlier this afternoon, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate or if it's okay to have a alternate. I do have a new job, and there may be an occasion where I would miss a meeting, and I would like to have an alternate from this group go in my stead.
Oh, Mayor.
Brad,
Mr. Simmons,
I'd like to
Sorry,
nominate
could you say a little
Brad.
bit louder?
the official alternate for it.
All right. So Mayor Simmons has agreed to be our alternate on CARPO. So thank you very much. All right. So the third appointment is to the Advancing the Plan Committee, which is an effort organized by Mayor Lyles and Central Line and others to have us all come together and have a conversation about what sort of transit authority model might be best for our region and our partners. And previously, Mayor Bales of Huntersville had served in that role, and she was the MTC representative. So now that she is doing something else, running for a different office, that seat is open. So at this time, is there anyone who'd like to put themselves forward for that position?
I'll do that, Madam Chair. I'll volunteer.
Wonderful. Mayor Washam, thank you. Anybody else want to put themselves forward? All right, then. All those in favor of Mayor Washam being appointed to that position, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And thank you very much for offering yourself, Mayor Washam.
Thank you.
At this time, we will turn to the approval of the minutes from our November 15th, 2023 meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Second for that? You do? Okay. Did we get one?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. And we are now at our public comment section of the meeting. So the first person signed up to speak is Mark L. Moore. You can come up. You have
3 minutes.
3 minutes, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, mayors, commissioners, Mr. Lathrop, and Mr. Cagle, and everyone at CATS. Thank you for letting me speak with you today. My name is Mark Moore, and I'm speaking on Envision My Ride and why prioritizing it as part of any regional plans is both critical to the region and fiscally responsible, making more progress for more people for less money and less time. I want to emphasize with recent discussions that Envision My Ride is both a transit plan and a roads first plan. Our roads are not just for our cars. Our bus system and people walking and biking rely on them just as heavily. Envision My Ride includes signal improvements on NCDOT roads for buses and drivers, sidewalk and crossing improvements for pedestrians, and better facilities for transit riders and drivers. It also serves a substantial part of the region rather than just one corridor or two corridors and can be built on as part of a broader regional plan. It's also very cost effective. Before inflation, in the plan, I know that things have changed since the original plan, but in the original plan, the local funding cost was $15 million a year for 10 years. Basically, a total cost of $300 million split half between local and other sources. That puts in a place where it would be something that could potentially be started while we wait for moving towards something like the tax in 2025, which we already have discussed is not coming very soon. For comparison, while they are important long-term, the red line's total cost before inflation was about $700 million. The silver line phase 1 was over $5 billion, and express lanes on I-77 South was about $2.1 billion. And including dedicated lanes, according to the plan, would unlock options for even more federal funding, and we've seen with Raleigh's BRT and other options that can be done fairly affordably. I believe their New Bern BRT is only about $100 million in there, or at least as originally proposed. We'll see if that changes. So I just wanted to, as someone who is a current rider and understands the mix of having to deal with sort of short-term and long-term and criticality of making progress on a somewhat short-term basis, that prioritizing Envision My Ride is a fiscally responsible way to make substantial transit improvement for more of the region in less time, and a critical part of any Roads First plan. And thank you for letting me come to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Our next speaker is Gray Madry.
Hi, my name is Gray Madry, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Charlotte Metro chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America as one of its elected co-chairs. I attended the TSAC meeting earlier this month where I announced the Charlotte Metro chapter's commitment to prioritizing public transit in our organizing for 2024, and this priority came about as the result of canvassing bus riders last year, where we learned the breadth and depth of the problems suffered by those who depend on but lack a reliable bus system in Charlotte. At the meeting, we asked Brent Cagle and other CAT staff about the contract with National Express Transit and their plan to reverse the decline in bus ridership over the past decade, and especially since the outbreak of COVID-19. So we look forward to hearing their report back on these questions at the February TSAC meeting. But in light of our chapter's 2024 priority, we're excited to hear about the mobility priority that Charlotte City Council set for 2024 at their recent strategy retreat. But the question is just, what does this really amount to? So Marcus Jones was reported to have said that the 1 cent sales tax, if it were to be implemented, it would generate $345 million in its first year. That revenue alone is 36% greater than CAT's total expenditures in the 2024 adopted budget. However, even after accounting for inflation, the 2024 CAT's expenditures are already 31% greater than they were in 2013 when bus ridership was at its peak, 3 times greater than it is today. So to be clear, we're in favor of expansive public investment in transportation throughout the metro region. But what these numbers help illustrate, we believe, is that prior to any particular budget, there's a political choice to spend it in a particular way. People in Charlotte are suffering today because of how today's money is being spent. So when Jones says he wants to find ways to start investing in transit sooner than a potential sales tax referendum, we wonder where the problem is, because that could start with getting bus service levels back to where they were not last year or 5 years ago, but at the peak of CAT service, because if it was done before, it can be done again if you choose to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate both of you coming. I feel like we should hear more from the public, and so I'm truly grateful for you taking your time out. All right, at this time, we will turn to the Interim Chief Executive for his report.
I have signed up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I only had 2 people signed up here.
I'm sorry, sir. You can go ahead. I just didn't get the voicemail message. You would just sign up with me when you finish speaking.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Steve Yaffe. I live in the Montclair neighborhood near the Archdale Light Rail Station. I'm a member of the Charlotte Regional Transportation Coalition, and I'm also a transit consultant. I've been in the field for almost 45 years. Primarily, I want to talk about public engagement, and I'm aware that the agenda for this meeting is posted on Friday, before the Wednesday evening meeting. Question is, could a heads up be provided on the issues likely to be in the MTC's headlights a full week before? That would provide stakeholder groups enough time to choose a spokesman who would then have the weekend to prepare remarks. And then that preliminary, and I understand it'd be preliminary agenda, stuff happens at the last minute, could then be circulated among those organizations who have registered interest in transit, distributed geographically and demographically in the CATS service area. I want to say I've had emails back and forth with Emily Kuntz, and I appreciate the plans that the CATS Communications Department has to upgrade the publicinput.com website to make input, especially to MTC and the component committees, easier. And then I was encouraged to talk about frequency, so I'll take off my CRTC hat and put on my transit consultant hat. The secret sauce, of course, reliability for building back bus ridership, ride time, which you envision my ride would do. But I can tell you from experience, having a route that connects a variety of higher intensity land uses is the secret sauce, and having that done every 15 minutes or better all day, every day. I oversaw the Arlington Transit Service in Arlington, Virginia. Our magic route was not a direct route. The ART 41 is shaped like a Z, connecting two high-intensity, low-income neighborhoods with a Ballston corridor, which is high-intensity mixed-use development, office, retail, commercial. And once we put in that 15 minutes, and once we went well past 9 o'clock at night to midnight, ridership boomed. And of course, the pandemic had its effect, but it's still doing very well. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you again. All right, Mr. Cagle, you're up.
Okay, welcome to new members. Welcome to returning members. I have a few things to report on this month. Starting on page 19 of your packet are our summary of monthly statistics. So what we are trying to do, we routinely provide monthly statistics to the MTC. That has been the norm. We are trying to improve on those reports, and this is a work in progress, but the first iteration of this is to provide you a summary of the details behind that. As we move forward, we want to create less of individual reports and more of a comprehensive monthly report in form and format for you to make this easier. So the page 19 and 20 are summaries of the information provided behind it in the monthly statistics. A couple things to note: Special Transportation Services, on their safety performance measures, we did have a preventable collision with damage greater than $500 in the month of December. This was simply an accident. The bus made contact with the rear of another vehicle. It was a minor accident, but nonetheless, it was still an accident and therefore reportable. When it comes to ridership, we have been seeing increases in ridership. Overall, our increases, overall ridership continued to increase during the months of November at 12.8% and December at 9.8%. So those are all good signs. We continue to see positive ridership trends. Routes were up 11% in November, and in December, those same local routes were up about 9.2%. We would expect that in December on local routes with the holidays and those kinds of things. Our express routes experienced an increase of 14.4% in November and then 2% in December. Again, especially on express routes, I do believe that the holiday plays into those numbers, since express routes are predominantly used by those commuting to work. And rail ridership, again, we saw positive increases, 16.4% in November, 12.8% in December. Those increases are driven entirely by the Blue Line. We continue to see the 1 weak spot in ridership increases has been the Gold Line, and we continue to see decreases month to month on the Gold Line. However, that is in all likelihood a direct result of the 30-minute headways on the Gold Line versus the 20-minute headways. When it comes to staffing, I think we mentioned back in September the staffing challenges we were facing and therefore the need to move to the 30-minute headways on the Gold Line. I will say staffing, all of our staffing numbers are looking much better over the last year. We are now at approximately a 19% vacancy rate, still a little bit higher than the average. Average is across the city of Charlotte, somewhere in the 13 to 15% range. So we're still trending a little bit higher than generally the city, but we're much more in line with it. When I started 13 months ago, we were seeing vacancy rates in the 40, 50, 60% range in some of our work groups. So critical vacancy levels, all of those vacancies levels have been brought down significantly. One of the areas on vacancies, it's a catch-22 on this, we still see high vacancies in our railcar maintenance group. That is because it takes approximately 18 months for training before you can be certified for railcar maintenance. The good news for that is we have seen a sharp increase in trainees in railcar maintenance. So as we work through the training protocols, that vacancy number will also start to come down. As I mentioned, we want to create better information to the MTC. So my recommendation would be on moving forward that we start to report vacancies, well, full-time positions, vacancies, and number of trainees as a general month-to-month report, since that is so critical to our business and being able to make service. In addition, we've talked a lot over the last 13 months about missed trips. I think you'll recall we had a low spot over the last 24 months of something like in the neighborhood of 10% missed trips monthly. Those numbers have also, with additional staffing, those numbers have gone down, and last month they were hovering right about 2%. That is a marked improvement from where we are. We would like that to be 0%, and I think we have discussed in the past, what is an acceptable number of missed trips, or what was CATS's standard in the past. And I think that I've told you in the past, CATS didn't have an acceptable standard because, quite frankly, we didn't have a missed trips problem. And so we want that to get down to 0 or as close to 0 as possible. And those missed trips really are directly impacted by lack of staffing or lack of operators to be able to run the trips. So again, we think it's important to put in vacancies as a standard metric for the MTC. We have also included the revenues, the monthly revenues. They are on page, of course, now I can't find it. Pages 56 and 55 and 56. The reason there are two is it's December and January, and we did not have a December meeting, so we've provided you both the December and the January numbers. Okay, the progress report. So on the progress report was created in response to the work group. So items are not being added to the progress report, but we still do have some items on the progress report to monitor. There are two new items to report to you, starting on page 58 on the progress report. There are two new items to report out to you. One is Miss Victoria Johnson, who has been overseeing our rail operations group as a special assistant to the CEO. She will be taking over rail and bus. And so that completes both sides of the Chief Operating Officer, and Victoria will be serving as our interim Chief Operating Officer with executive oversight over the rail and bus groups. Victoria has been overseeing rail for the last approximately 12 months, shortly after I joined CATS 13 months ago. The other item to report on are the bridge inspections. About a year ago, we noted that our aerial structures or bridges all were overdue for inspection. We completed those inspections with the exception of 6 bridges. The reason those 6 bridges had not been inspected or have not been inspected is they required right of entry agreements and scheduling through railroads because they are in railroad right-of-ways. We received the right of entry agreements and we are awaiting on a flagging crew to be able to enter the right-of-way. The railroads involved we are on the schedule. They have provided us flagging crews, and we have started the inspections and anticipate completing all of the inspections by the end of this month, at which point we will provide yet another update in February on the status of those inspections. So the bridge inspections are close to complete, so that is good news. The only other couple items I wanted to make you aware of were just current events related to CATS. So on December 22nd, we had a bus operator. His bus was on LaSalle Road. The bus operator was struck by a stray bullet, so he was shot. CMPD is investigating. The stray bullet came from a vehicle, and it appeared to be an unrelated incident, right? The bus happened to be on LaSalle Road while these 2 vehicles, there was apparently a gunfight between occupants in the vehicles. Stray bullet entered the bus, struck the bus driver, high, depending on the report, high in the chest or low in the neck, somewhere right around his collarbone. The operator is okay. Great news. He was transported immediately, went into surgery. He is okay and recovering and making a recovery now from his physical injuries, and certainly we will continue to provide you updates as he continues to recover. And we, TMOC, Transit Management of Charlotte, continues to check in on him to see how he's doing and assess his ability to return to work. I will note Mr. Jamal Pullen with NCDOT SSO is with us this evening. So I was going to provide you an update on the January 6th NCDOT directive, directing CATS to remove from revenue service its 100 and 200 series light rail vehicles from revenue service. Revenue service is using the vehicles for day-to-day service to make the scheduled service. So that's what that means. So on January 6th, we received a directive from NCDOT to remove those 100 and 200 vehicles from revenue service. We complied with that directive. I'll go back to why that directive came out, but I also wanted to hit on a couple things. So one thing is we've provided everyone this handout so that as we talk through these things, sometimes some of the industry or the rail specific things we talk about, I understand them and CATS folks understand them, but we also understand it may be completely not understandable to everyone else in the room. So we didn't want to overdo this, but we did want to provide you some detail about a light rail vehicle. So if you think about the blue line, one light rail vehicle has 3 wheel assemblies, which we call trucks. And those trucks, there are 2 different types of trucks on every light rail vehicle. There's an A truck, a B truck, and a C truck. The A and the B trucks provide power or propulsion to the vehicles, and the C truck is in the middle and it provides ride. Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. Lots of paper.
And the C truck provides just a better ride. It's there in the middle of the vehicle. It does not provide propulsion. CATS, as a standard operating procedure, runs 2-car trains. So a 2-car train is 2 light rail vehicles hooked together as one train. That is not a requirement. It's just something that CATS has done traditionally, but doesn't have to be done. Each vehicle can operate independently as a one-car train. And then you'll see at the bottom the graphic between the A and B and the C trucks. So NCDOT asked us to remove the 100 and 200 vehicles on the evening of January 6th. We complied with that directive. We have exactly 42 light rail vehicles in the fleet, of which 20 are 100 and 200 series vehicles, and 22 are 300 series vehicles. The difference in them is the 100 and 200s were purchased at the inception of the Blue Line. The 300s were purchased with the Blue Line extension. So the 100 and 200s are about 15 years old. The 300s are about half that, 7.5 to 8 years old. On a daily basis, to make stated scheduled service, we require 20 light rail vehicles, i.e. we run 10 trains daily. So how the math breaks out: 42 total vehicles, 20 100 and 200s were removed, but 2 were able to remain in service. And that's because 2 of the 100 and 200 vehicles had already had the truck overhaul maintenance completed on them, all right? So we're at 2 100 and 200s plus 22 300s, but we have to subtract 1 300 vehicle that was in a large accident many years ago and is not able to be put back in service. So where does that put us? We have a fleet of 23 light rail vehicles, which enables us to make daily service of a need of 20 vehicles. Now, those 23 vehicles, that is a very lean spare ratio. So what would happen if on any given day we do not have 23 vehicles available to go out? And that can happen because all of these vehicles require routine maintenance from time to time. So that could happen. So what we would do, let's say in this example, we have 19 vehicles available to start a morning and we have a need of 20. What we would do is 1 train would go out as a 1 vehicle train. 9 trains would go out as 2 vehicle trains plus the 1. And as soon as we could add in the additional vehicle, we would do that. That could create an impact, although it's a very minor impact to the passenger, in that 1 train during a peak period may be more crowded, right? But it will be backed up by a series of 2-car trains. Where this really comes into play, especially with 2-car trains, is those peak periods in the mornings and the afternoons, basically going to and from work. And clearly on our busiest day, Wednesday, it comes into play. And so our maintenance crews are doing everything they can to continue sending out 2-car trains, especially during those peak periods. But in this period, while we only have 23 light rail vehicles available, it could happen where we have to send out a 1-car train for some period of time. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions.
That was a meaty update. Mr. Higdon.
Yeah, I have a question. I understand that right now we're running very lean, but weren't we running really rich previously to that? If we have 40-something trains and you only need 20?
Well, we are, but the other thing that you'd like to do, because of the maintenance needs, there is a significant amount of maintenance requirements on these vehicles, and it allows you, quite honestly, to be better at what we needed to be better at, which is doing heavy maintenance. Requires the vehicles to go out for an extended period. So while it does sound like a very rich spare ratio, it helps to account for those longer periods when heavy maintenance has to be completed, and that can take up to 6-8 weeks as we do that maintenance.
What's our schedule on returning trucks from rebuild?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I mentioned, 2 are already returned. We already, in the next 60 days, we have at least another 2, if not another 3 sets scheduled for return. Basically, now that Siemens is conducting the truck overhauls in Florida as well as California, it should expedite that, and we are working with Siemens to get a better schedule of the send out and the return of those vehicles, and I will bring that back. But we expect another 3 in the next 60 days to come back to be returned. And to that point, 23 will continue to grow, right? Because these vehicles need to remain out of service until after they have had the overhaul completed.
On your light rail maintenance, is that an internal training protocol, that 18 months? Or is there an institute somewhere that you guys are hoping to pull potential employees from?
We provide in-house training to our rail car maintenance.
Are you pretty well staffed up with future employees, if you will?
We are. We will be, over the next few months, talking about our operating budget requests. And we do have requests, we do anticipate requesting additional staffing for training so that we can increase our capacity of the pipeline, if you will. But we are doing pretty well. We are doing far better today than we were 12 months ago.
Anybody online?
Yeah, Brett, let me ask a quick question. You've alluded to twice we are in a better position staff-wise than we have been historically. Is that what's the shift there? Why have we done a better job recruiting? Or are we doing a better job with retainage, or what?
So many factors. One is I think that we are doing a good job in creating higher morale in the organization. You don't change culture in a year, but you can see the positive impacts of culture change in a year, and I think we are seeing that. Quite frankly, better pay. Operator pay or field unit pay, whether it's in bus or rail, the average increases are anywhere in the 12 to 15%, a few work groups even higher than that. We were not competitive in our pay. The bus operators negotiated a new collective bargaining agreement that took effect about a year ago. Their average increases were about 12% over all of their job classes. CATS implemented the same type of pay increases, anything from 10 to 18% across our operators. And our operators is the rail operators, paratransit operators, rail car maintenance, and ROC by the Rail Operations Control Center, the Bus Operations Control Center. So by and large, our field units, our safety and security units as well. So pay makes a big difference. It's a hard job, and I think we fell behind. We were not competitive in where we needed to be. And as you mentioned, much more aggressive recruitment. Quite frankly, another strategy that we've utilized is we are willing to over-recruit, right? And so we're always out there recruiting instead of waiting for vacancies and then trying to recruit to fill them. We're always out there recruiting, and if we can bring in a steady pipeline, I would much rather be overstaffed for some period than understaffed for some period. And that was a fundamental shift in thinking. Now, that does have a cost impact, for sure, but it puts us in a much better position when we think about making service and maintaining operations in the schedule.
Well, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the change in culture and the dynamic changes that have been made under your tenure as the leader of this organization. So I want to thank you for jumping into this fray and helping to bring about this dynamic shift that we're seeing. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So,
Oh, 1 second. Anybody else online? Okay, then I have a few questions. And I second that, Mayor Knox, and I think this is really helpful, by the way. Thank you for the illustration. So the vacancy levels that are improving, does that mean that you can improve headways? Restore headways to what they were?
So as we get into the budget, we do want to talk about that. A year ago, our frequency was impacted by lack of operators or insufficient operators. Quite frankly, as we go into the budget, everything costs more after COVID than it did, before. We will have challenges, not because of lack of operators restoring frequency, really because of the cost of the service to start to restore frequency as we start thinking about the future.
Okay. And when you were speaking about improving vacancy levels, that was for rail. That was not referring to bus service, which is handled by the third-party intermediary. Do you know how their staffing is?
Yeah, their staffing is improving as well. They're seeing very strong recruit classes as well as graduation, classes that have been graduated. So you are correct. They do not work for the city of Charlotte, but I was referring to all operators, rail and bus operators as well. And we'll provide more detail on that as we move forward on all of those work groups.
So I appreciate NCDOT being willing to be available by virtually tonight to, in case anyone had any follow-up questions. I do. My understanding is that, well, first let me say, I thank everybody who took the highest level of care and concern for the safety of residents. So that's, just a baseline. But just so I can understand the thinking, because basically NCDOT's letter pulled 50% of our trains out of service. And my understanding is that, one of the trucks had excessive play in the wheels, and you checked all the other, 100 and 200 series, and none of them had that excessive play. So to people who are asking me, was this a little bit of a overkill or overcorrection, I just would like to hear from you why NCDOT did give that directive, just to make sure I understand all the dynamics at work.
Can you all hear me?
We can now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is Jamal Poland. I'm with NCDOT and the Rail Division within the State Safety Oversight Program. So that's under my umbrella. The reasoning behind the directive that we sent to CATS was that the issue before was around journal bearings, and that is within the wheel itself. You can't get to the wheel within the operations that railcar maintenance has. So, they could see that the wheel was spinning, but they can't open the wheel up. That would have to be sent to Siemens to understand exactly what was behind causing those flat spots. So the railcar maintenance actually had a plan to pull the 100 and 200s and park those and use 300s and only use the 100 and 200s as spares. They had not implemented that yet. That they were working through that plan. What we actually did within the SSO department was just accelerate that. We said, we think this needs to be implemented now. Go ahead and pull the 100s and 200s, check them like you were, and check the 300s. However, we don't want the 100s and 200s to be used as spares. They need to sit until those overhauls have occurred. And so that's what we did. We just took essentially what railcar maintenance was already looking at doing, decided to go ahead and say that needed to be done now, and then also not use those cars as spares.
Okay, thank you. I guess what I'm hearing you say is that even though they were all inspected and you didn't see the defect, that you'd have to open up at an even more granular level to be sure, and you weren't able to do that without pulling them all out and sending them off. Is that right?
That's right. Okay. Yeah, and Mr. Cagle might be able to talk to that. I think some Siemens representatives came and looked, and, there are other bearings, there are other parts within the wheel that they can't get to until they've got it in their shop. So, something to have a flat spot that soon after it had been smoothed over, to have it occur again, you just don't know exactly what that is. The rail car maintenance didn't think it was a journal bearing, and that was, the issue the last time, but there are other items within that wheel that they would not be able to analyze until Siemens has it in their shop.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to say, starting 13 months ago, I think I lived through the wrong way to report these kinds of maintenance issues, right? And we were all in it together. We got through it. I will say, I think that working together with NCDOT, our rail car maintenance, our safety and security, our rail operators, this is, the silver lining here is this is how the system is supposed to work. This is how we identify possible issues, we investigate those issues, and we take action. And then we report out. And so, I think that together, in a strange way, together this shows the impact of the change at the staff level, and they did excellent work, everyone involved. And I will say I really appreciated the partnership with NCDOT. It's not great to have the 100s and 200s out of service, but it is an abundance of caution, and this is really why we have safety protocols and maintenance protocols, and this is the system working.
I agree. I appreciate the process very much.
Mr. Cagle, I also wanted to mention the operator did an excellent job too in identifying those flat spots and calling that in immediately. I did want to mention that.
One thing to note, and I don't want to get deep in the weeds about train stuff. So there's kind of two things that have been said out there, flat spots and wheel play. So a flat spot occurs on wheels, and it is exactly what it sounds like. A wheel gets a very small flat spot on it, usually the depth, the skinny side of a dime. We're talking about 1 to 2 millimeters. And what happens is, for a passenger, it may not even be noticeable, right? They may hear it. Usually the indicator of a flat spot is, as the train is moving forward, it clicks as that flat spot hits the rail. Operators are trained to hear that and know that that is a suspected flat spot and report it. And that's exactly what happened in this case. First time it happened on 12/30. Flat spots happen. They are normal, and we have a maintenance protocol for truing the wheel or removing the flat spot. So on December 30th, an operator noted it on this LRV, and they reported it. Railcar maintenance did their job. They trued the wheel. They did a test run. Everything was fine, and it went back out. On January the 4th, an operator reported telltale sign of clicking, went straight back into railcar maintenance. On the 5th, they diagnosed it as a flat spot. But on this instance, they said, wait a minute, flat spots are not uncommon, but they shouldn't occur in a 5-day period. That's not normal. So railcar maintenance initiated a further investigation, and upon investigation, what they found was, and this is the root of the issue, this was the real problem, was excessive play in the wheel. And I'm not a really technical person, so if you think about looking at a wheel from the front, and it's rotating, it should be straight up and down. It shouldn't wobble. Excessive play in the wheel means it wobbled. It went back and forth. It had some wobble in the wheel. And the accepted tolerances for excessive play is 0. There should be no excessive play in a wheel. So when railcar maintenance noted that is a more serious issue, safety and security was then engaged, NCDOT was engaged, as well as Siemens. So Siemens has already been on site. They were on site on the 8th, I believe, so just after the occurrence. They did an initial review of the wheel. They agree that excessive play should not be there, and they are going to conduct a full root cause analysis. We do not have that root cause analysis completed yet. They are estimating in the next 30 to 60 days that root cause analysis will be complete. However, as Mr. Pullen stated, we know that this was not, these flat spots, this excessive play, was not created by the journal bearing. That's what we've talked about in the past, a failure of the journal bearing. However, there are many different types of bearings in a wheel. And we suspect, but this is what root cause is there was a separate bearing in the wheel assembly, again, due to age, likely failed. And so we will know more when the root cause comes. But I think in abundance of caution, until we know that, it is best to get that maintenance done and to work through that process.
All right, thank you. So I think next up is a budget update from Chad. Thank you very much.
All right, so they tell me this will work, so fingers crossed. Good evening, Chairwoman Altman and Commission members. I'm Chad Howell, I'm the CATS CFO, and I'll be presenting our budget process tonight going forward until adoption by this body in April. Yes. This evening, I'll discuss CAT's proposed budget development process, our FY25 strategic outlook and priorities, and our proposed budget calendar. I'll also update the Commission on CAT's year-end FY23 budget and our projections for FY24. But before I proceed, I'd like to thank CAT's budget staff and development staffs for the work in developing and vetting CAT's operating and capital budgets, and also all the division staff, many of who are sitting here tonight, that supported us in this year's process. The kickoff, just as a point of reference, the kickoff started in August, and we're still assembling and vetting the budget now. As the Commission members may remember, as part of our strategy session in October, we mentioned a series of workshops with the MTC to ensure our FY25 budget aligns with the Commission's priorities. So that's a little something different this year than we've done in the past. Here is the proposed process leading to budget adoption. Staff, as I said, started in August and has assembled and vetted CAT's preliminary operating and capital budgets. Those budgets, they're not complete yet. In other words, we're still vetting. Mr. Cagle did a great job of summarizing some of the things that we're working through, not only in 24, but into 25. And so those budgets remain under review by senior leadership. And what we're proposing is that the workshop, an operating workshop be held in February and a capital workshop be held in March. And later in the presentation, I'll have, or as you may have seen, as if you reviewed, we do have a proposed budget calendar from now through adoption by this body and then ultimately by the city. Before discussing FY25, though, I think it's important to look at where we were and where we are before we discuss where we're going. So I'm going to start with the FY23 year-end budget wrap up. Uh-oh. Could you advance it for me? Thank you. Start with the revenue, and as we walk through these, I'll touch on the revenues, and then I'll touch on the expenditures for 23 and 24, and then we'll get into 25. Sales tax for FY23, we did well with the collection. We exceeded our original estimate by almost $18 million. Again, that is due to the strength of the local economy, but again, these, as everyone here knows, this is a very volatile revenue, and so while we don't take that $18 million in 23 for granted going forward, we still maintain a very conservative estimate as we move forward. Federal and state grants, there is a $21 million difference here. That does not mean that we did not received funds that we could have. However, it is an indication that there was a possible misalignment between grant reimbursements and associated expenditures. So the funds that you see here that were represented by this difference are still available potentially for us to use going forward if we align or realign our expenditures appropriately, and we are looking to do that. Passenger fares, while they did improve up to 14 million here from 12 million in 2022, they did not recover as much as we had hoped that they would, so we were a little under those ending FY23. The other side of the coin here, this is our actual operating expenditures for 23. We did have some personal service savings, is a lot of it. The savings are largely due from, and you heard Mr. Cagle talk about this, mention this, salary savings due to vacancies and turnover within the department. So during FY23, we had a number of vacant positions. They stayed vacant for a while, and so those amounts did lead to some savings. All the other items throughout the budget, we pretty much spent what we said that we would as part of the budget. And then overall, give or take, we contributed to our fund balance a net of about $3 million. So we had about $3 million more revenues than we did in expenditures for FY23. So that was where we are. That was where we were. This is kind of talking about where we are, our FY24 budget. The FY24 mid-year budget includes actual revenues and expenditures through December of 23, plus expected revenues, expenditures, and transfers through June 30 of 24. I'll touch on a few of the key items here: sales tax, our grants, and our passenger fares. Sales tax, we projected a slight increase over year-end 23. So in 23, we ended the year about 155-ish. I think we'll end this year in 24 about 158. That's based on current receipts. I believe we are on target to meet or exceed our budget, and we do update this body every month on our receipts. So it's our actuals plus our projected to year-end, and we update the commission every month. Federal and state grants, again, hopefully we'll continue to utilize some of those prior year grants that we talked about. We are working to align new and realign older grants to current needs. For example, realigning unspent grant funds so that they can be used to reimburse rail and facilities maintenance activities. So it's an amendment process that we have to go through with these grants. You have what's called a grant agreement. That grant agreement said you would spend funds for certain activities, and we have staff that are now looking through those activities, seeing if there's savings there, and then we can realign those funds to something that we need them to today. And that is a CATS-wide process that we go through. Many folks are involved, but we're looking to better utilize or best utilize those funds based on current needs. Passenger fares, ridership continues to improve. However, not quite at the rate that we projected, so we are assuming that we are projecting that we'll be just under in our revenues. For example, and these are some statistics we've shared. I believe we shared these during the strategy session. Ridership has increased 50% on bus and more than double on rail since the return to work, but total ridership remains about 34% below pre-pandemic levels. I did a little bit of kind of background look at this, and it was really interesting to see the 3 years kind of pre-COVID. I believe that our average revenues were in the low 20 millions. If you look at the 3 years kind of COVID, 2021 and 22, came down to around 12 million. So that's pretty good drop there on average. And then now we're starting to see, as we're moving back up, 15, 16 million a year. So still not back to the kind of the 3 years prior to the pandemic, but we're starting to make that upward swing. Our operating expenditures, one thing I want to call the Commission's attention to is on personal services. There were some benefits costs that we did miss in the adoption budget process. primarily due to lack of formal transition between myself and the previous CFO, coupled with majority of CATS staff being, budget staff being new to CATS. And so there were just some charges that did not get brought over as they were in prior years. Couple that with some overtime costs that we need to bear. Again, Mr. Cagle did a great job of setting kind of the stage for this in his briefing. Also annualizing some of the changes that we've made to salaries over the year. But I will say we did recognize this early on in this year's budget, and we are working on some ideas to solve that. We think come year end, and you'll see this, that things will balance out. Within our operating budget expenses, we are on track to spend, as a reminder, and again, thanks to the commission for recommending a budget that was ultimately adopted that included roughly $37 million in maintenance across the board. We're on track to spend that or maybe a little bit more. An improved safety and security contract and services at about $10 million. We're on track to spend that or maybe a little bit more. And fuel costs, our fuel costs around $7.5 million a year, as an example. So we're on track. Those are some of the biggest operating expenses that we have. And we're looking for ways to where we can close out the year such that we will be on track. And right now, we do project that we'll come in right at what our revenues will be for year end. So now moving forward to our 25 strategic outlook.
Chad, hold on just a second.
Yes, sir.
So can you go back a slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the thing here to note, the projected expenditures at 257, go back one more. We are projecting to be balanced. There's been a little plus and minuses in certain areas, but we continue to project to be balanced. Now, if you can go back to 9. So where does that come from? When you see the last column there, transfer to reserve, what that really means is dollars that are, in effect, transferred to the CAT-specific reserve fund, and then could be available for future use for capital or operating or any use. So what we're really saying is financially we are stable. We're projecting a balanced budget at the end of the year. What the difference is, there's less transfer to reserve that because it's being spent for the day-to-day operations. Now, is that concerning? Right? That's a fair question. Our reserves, currently we have a requirement to maintain at least, at a minimum, 130 million.
Yes.
In reserve funds. So those are requirements that we have per policies and bond covenants when we issue debt. We have well in excess of 130 million. We have no risk by not transferring to reserve of being at risk of dipping below that 130 million required reserve. So we still have ample reserves for our capital needs and to meet all of the bond requirements that we have.
We have, just to add a little bit more to that, we closed FY 23 with approximately a little over 200 million in total reserves. So we're well above the 130 minimum requirement. And I will say too that with the personal services here, so I'm glad I got a chance to address this a little bit. We learned from that. We learned quickly, and those are captured in as we present to you FY25 budget next month and go through the operating expense in details and seeking your guidance on that. You'll see that we have captured and annualized all of those costs.
Yeah, Chad's being a little bit too hard on himself, I think. There was clearly transition issues, lack of transition issues. But in prior years, before we pulled together this budget, it had been the practice of CATS to budget the TMOC employees in the personal services lines. And what that means is budgeting their benefits, their FICA, all of those things that come when you're budgeting a salary. They were doing that, which is very odd. I have never seen a contractor budgeted in personal services. It gets budgeted in operating expense. And so this was one that as Chad mentioned, we didn't see it. It is an odd thing, but that lack of transition certainly affected us as we sort of jumped in to pick up the reins in December when the former CFO and CEO departed. That's not a mistake we will make again, but the good news is we do have adequate revenues to support the expenditures in the current year.
Is that, I'm sure that $130 million is a moving number. They demand more every year as their cost to operate go up, or is that staying the same?
It is not. It is a set target. Now, it can be evaluated from time to time. And so one question has been asked is, well, 130 sounds like a lot of money. Is it enough? No. And so that's true. There is no magic number, right? You can't go out to every transit agency and say, well, how much do you have? The right number is really dependent on the revenue source. And the biggest factor for us is sales taxes they're a great revenue source, so I don't want this to sound wrong. They're the least stable revenue source out there. Property taxes would be far superior, but sales taxes are great, but they are least stable from a financial standpoint. We think that given our primary stream is sales taxes, 130 is adequate. But it is just adequate. We would like to see over the longer term building that. And as Chad mentioned, we do have well over 130 in reserves, even though it's not required. We have approximately, did you say 200, Chad?
Approximately 200.
Yeah, so it doesn't fluctuate other than if we need to reevaluate it. I think 130 as a minimum is sufficient, but given our sales tax revenues, it's certainly, it's not excessive, but we do have additional reserves.
Good question.
Yep.
What percentage of your revenue source, and I know it's very small, is from passenger fares? You showed like 14 million or something. It's pretty low, right?
It is.
And the reason I ask is I forget which network it was, something over the weekend I saw where there is not an expectation nationally that we're ever going to return to pre-pandemic everybody in the office 5 days a week, because people are not accepting that, and they're quitting jobs that require them to be in the office 5 days a week. So just making that comment, I'm sure you're making that consideration, but passenger fare is a very small portion of your budget, correct?
It is.
Just rounding the top of my head, 10% or less.
Yeah. Pandemic, it was lower than 10%. It's now, with riders increasing, it's recovering, but it will always be a relatively small percent. Now, on fare, our fares are not the highest out there, but they're certainly not the lowest. So one of the things that we are looking at embarking on this year is a fare study to see if there is a better way to set fares from an equity standpoint, but also from a revenue standpoint. In an odd way, by lowering fares, we actually may be able to address equity and generate additional revenues through lowered fares. And so there's literally an entire science in sort of setting fares and the best way to do that, and we're going to hire the folks who know that science to make recommendations across the entire system on all modes on the best strategy for setting fares. Our fares are out of date, for sure.
Any other questions? Anyone online? Oh, go ahead, please.
So first of all, thank you, Mr. Hall, for that. So I have a few questions. So one of which is when it comes to, so going back to Mr. Cagle talking about labor, we're at about 19% at vacancy rate. So are we on budget to be able to, so if in the event, in the hopeful event that we were to able to fill in that 19% and even have, let's say, net new labor, are we on budget to be able to maintain that for fiscal year 24?
We'll cover it in 24. We'll get through the year, and more importantly, we're also planning for that. That's part of why we're taking our time to vet through the numbers for 25, and so that is to capture where we think we'll need to be with staffing to meet the service levels that we need to have, and that would include adding, closing down or lowering that vacancy rate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So a few more questions. I'll kind of just rapid fire. You can answer when you're ready. But so last year you had mentioned how there's one of the priorities is bus stop amenities. So I want to make sure that that was still the case for this year. I also wanted to comment on, so when it comes to the primary revenue stream being sales tax, and obviously that being more volatile than others, are there other areas that you may hope to increase in revenue to be able to cover for the potential volatility in the sales tax revenue? And then last is more so a comment than a question. Is that I'm very much looking forward to seeing what can be kind of produced from whatever report when it comes to looking at fares across the board, because that could vary, because improving and lowering fares can be one, more equitable, and also two, could bring in more ridership. So that's it for my questions.
I can address those broadly. In response to the bus stops. So we did last year talk about we were going to ensure that the prior year money that we had was spent and allocated as quickly as we could, and we did add some new money to it for this year. That's still underway now. That is part of our capital program. And then as we get into the capital program for 25 through 29, our 5-year rolling capital program, we'll be looking at continuing that focus. We understand that's very important to the commission, and so we'll be looking at that and bringing that back as part of our capital budget presentation in March. Alternative revenue sources. That's music to my ears, right? Anytime, even if sales tax were not as volatile as it could be, anytime I think you can diversify your revenue stream is a good thing. We are, for example, one of the areas we're looking at, and it's not going to be, a panacea that solves it all, but we are looking at advertising revenues, things like that, to see, are we maximizing those? Are we collecting those in the way that is, creates a stronger revenue stream for that, and then other areas as need be. I will jump ahead a bit and say one thing that we're not looking at for 25 is increasing fares. So fares will stay, the proposal right now, or what we're looking at right now, is they will stay where they are now, pending the results of the fare study. But so that's somewhere we're not looking. But yes, generally we are looking at what other transit agencies are doing, where we see some capacity for additional revenues, because again, the more you can diversify your revenue stream, the better, more safe it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Any more questions from anyone online or in the room? All right. Then we will turn to our last two items. We'll be hearing from our advisory groups, beginning with TSAC.
He's still got 2025.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were done presenting. I'm sorry. Please continue.
It's okay, Chairwoman Altman. I took some liberty, personal liberty, and answered a few questions.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I think between Mr. Cagle and other committee, we've moved right into 25. So in 25, we are looking at our revenues. Is something we're focusing heavily on now. Sales tax, again, because of the volatility, we've talked about that. We're right now only showing projecting for purposes of budget about a 3% increase above 24. Fares, y'all set me up perfect on this. Right now, we are talking about keeping those roughly flat from a revenue perspective, and no fare increase at this point. Grants, we're going to continue to look to best utilize the grants that we have, apply for grants that we think we can get, or even the ones we hope we can get, the aspirational ones like the Lono that we got this past year, or this current fiscal year. We'll continue to apply those and try to best utilize grant funds. Strategic utilization of our reserves. Again, some of the reserves that we have, how can we best utilize those to meet the strategic priorities of the MTC? And then also looking at the possibility of, we've touched on this before, still working with City Finance on the possibility of debt funding some parts of our capital program that make the most sense. Here's kind of the way that looks graphically, kind of what I just described. Again, right now, we're looking at a preliminary estimate of about $251 million, but we're still continuing to refine that. And we'll be providing an update on a projection at the operating budget workshop in February. For 25, our focus at this point in preparing to get a budget together, a structurally balanced budget, hopefully together to bring to this group to review in February, is we're focusing on our strategic priorities. For example, preliminary operating, we're putting a lot of emphasis on maintenance. Right now, some of the proposals that have come in show an $18 million increase in maintenance. I'm talking all types of maintenance. So we're vetting that. Safety and security, an additional $8 million potential increase there, heavily targeted toward the safety and security contracts. We're still looking at these numbers, but I wanted to set some of the tone of what I think we'll come back with in February. Training, Mr. Cagle mentioned training, and obviously annualizing the cost, the personal services increases that we've made. Again, to keep those, we don't want to lose any of that great ground that we've gained there with retaining staff. So that has a price tag with it as well. Preliminary capital, again, touching on some of the capital items. Vehicle replacements will be huge. We're working to align the fleet replacement plan with available funding. Systems and facilities maintenance, so that's the rights of way, that's the facilities that we have, parking decks, those type of things. We're going to be focusing on those this coming year. Advancing the transit system master plan, Silver Line, Red Line, Metro Rapid Transit BRT, and other areas. Those are just a few that we're kind of the broad areas that we're looking at in the 2025 to 29 CIP.
All right. Is that?
I think he's got one more.
Oh, okay.
And I'll just say, yes, ma'am. Here's our budget. This just kind of formalizes what I just talked about throughout. We'll be coming back to this group in February with an operating budget workshop, and then in March with a capital budget workshop, and then looking to present for adoption in April timeframe to the MTC adoption, and then that will forward that on to this city for consideration in the city's budget.
So one thing that we would pose as a question to the MTC, in February, March, and in April, sort of thinking about those as the progression of the budget, February being operating budget, March being capital, April being bringing it all together with final approval, we would ask consideration of starting the meeting or holding a budget workshop at an earlier time than 5:30. Our suggestion would be 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that. Workshop and then normal agenda for those three. Now, the April meeting, It will need an earlier start time simply because April overlaps. It's one of those meetings that overlaps with CRTPO. But, you know, the April is where we would target sort of finalizing, presenting to MTC the final budget after having those February and March workshops.
Obviously, we need to have the time to complete our work. Does anybody have an objection to what Mr. Cakel's proposed? Okay, then, let's do that.
I would prefer 3 over
3 o'clock.
That's possible.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. I think I'm not seeing any hands, so we will now turn to a presentation from Mr. Herms of TSAC.
Thank you. So, my chair report is going to be both December and August, just because there was significant stuff in December. So, obviously, with the departure of Chrissy from TSAC, we did hold an election for chair and vice chair. So, I have ascended from the vice chair position to the chair position for this year, and Mr. Bob Moran, seated here, is now our vice chair. So, if you haven't already met him. He is, Mason.
From Matthews.
Yes, from the great town of Matthews, yes.
Hold that against
So he's been an excellent member, so I'm glad to have him as our vice chair. So one of the last things Chrissy did as chair of TSAC was the creation of the annual report for TSAC. So some highlights that I want to share with you all include that a lot of our accomplishments include kind of improving dedicated funding for bus stop improvements. So being able to see that in last year's budget was definitely a lot of excitement for us, as well as kind of seeing that fare capping rolled out in 2022 has provided some great savings to our riders, which has been good. CAT's newly formed customer experience team, led by Pamela White, is a very great change within CAT's, because we as TSAC are uniquely formed to be able to be leveraged for Pamela's kind of new role. So we're very excited to see what that's going to bring into 2024. And then issues that need to be addressed include things such as the CATS app need to better reflect stops that may be existing or not existing, as well as updating bugs. Many of our recommendation that elected officials at some point this year try to maybe spend a day riding transit, so you can be able to experience, be able to see what it is like for many of the riders / your constituents. And then, of course, one of the big ones is always service frequency. So making sure that CATS is more transparent on the ability to recruit and retain bus operators and hire net new labor to be able to help with frequency. And I was very pleased to be able to hear the progress so far, but there's still progress to be made. So in January, we had the co-chairs from the Charlotte Metro DSA, and they've made a lot of very good points when it comes to how the current frequency has affected the working class within the Charlotte Metro area. So that's very important. I'm glad that it's part of their priorities for this year, and it's something that speaks very true to many of us TSAC members. We had the Interim CEO report, which includes a lot of the stats as far as the technical issues for the train, and we also are very grateful for Mr. Cagle being able to come to some of our TSAC meetings. And then finally, for the CATS advisory board structure, so we voted unanimously for staff to have an exploration of the CATS advisory board structure, which in terms of how the structure will be, could there be a potential merging of TSAC and CTAC? But it was essentially a unanimous vote on the exploration of the CATS advisory board structure. So we're very excited to see what can come of that. So.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, then we will hear from Mr. Parker of CTAG.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'm just going to go over briefly what we talked about for our CTAG meeting, which occurred last week. Mr. Howell, of course, gave us the budget update as well as the financial management oversight audit update. So some of the things you heard here tonight were things we had discussed in our meeting, excuse me. Then Mr. Cagle, as always, has given us a great education on light rail maintenance. I never knew that I would know so much about how light rail vehicles are maintained, but thanks to Mr. Cagle for helping us out with that and really providing us with perhaps more insight than we ever thought we'd have into that. Finally, we also talked about the structure of CTAG and TSAC and the possibility of combining them into one committee. We had a brief discussion about that. Some members, at least brought up the idea that it might get unwieldy having too many people in one board. I think some members are concerned about the opposite problem being if we combine the two, consolidate the two, and remove members, then it would result in maybe a lack of representation. So we had some discussion around that, but ultimately we also took a vote and came to the unanimous conclusion that we should move forward with studying as well, along with our TSAC friends, excuse me. Sorry. So anyways, that's it from CTAG for this month, and we will provide you with an update next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Parker?
I've got a question.
Yep.
Can one or both of you comment on how the scopes of what your mission is are different or the same?
You want to go first?
So speaking very broadly, so TSAC is very much on a lot of the kind of on the general operation within CAT. So for example, we talk into the minutia of, for example, if we were to do altering certain routes or the alignment of certain routes, how will that look? Things such as certain title, I'm forgetting the number of analysis when it comes to routes. So we deal a lot within that. Some of the presentations that you guys may get, we may also get. So for example, we do get interim CEO reports such as the plan on the vehicles. We also talk about things such as service issues and the customer experience. And then obviously there is a more budget focus when it comes to CTAC. And of course, Mr. Parker can more elaborate on that.
Yeah, so as Mr. Hearn stated, our primary focus is the budget. So our 4 big months are this month all the way through April. Sort of a secondary part of our mission is to evaluate the long-term transit plan, capital plan, provide recommendations along those lines. And informally, we do provide some advocacy. This is more TSAC's, or at least my understanding of how TSAC runs. But informally, we are also transit advocates as well, but primarily budget. Secondary is long-term transit plan.
It seems like there is some overlap.
There is.
Very significant overlap.
So the study will happen and we'll get more information then.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, before I take a motion to adjourn, let me just make a comment and see if anyone else has any final comments. I really want to thank Katz and Mr. Cagle. I really feel that we're on a good track, and specifically to say that I'm excited that Mr. Cagle and Jason Lawrence have been wonderfully available. I've been meeting with them and the chair of the school board and the top-level transportation staff for CMS. We've been meeting monthly for the last 6 months or so. And every single month, we make a little more progress towards, what could be an innovation of collaboration between CATS and CMS. So I just really want to publicly thank you for that dedication. And every single month, I get excited because we're just a little bit closer. And secondly, to thank CEO, the interim CEO, because he's going to be coming to the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners on February 20th, just for a visit, just to hear what their questions are and bring them up to speed. And, you know, during the pandemic, our public health director would visit each of the towns on a regular cadence because there were a lot of questions, you know, at that time. And so she was very available, and it really did a lot to build relationships and, you know, clear up questions as we went through that process. So I think it's wonderful. I'm so grateful that Mr. Cagle is going to be coming to the county commission. I know he's equally available to any of your boards. And so I think that's just a great way to, like I said, build relationships and all get sort of harmonized. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
excited.
And as Commissioner Allman said, I am always available to, if you'd like a CATS update to your town commissions. I'm happy to do that. Just let me know. We're happy to coordinate. The last thing I will say, not to add in too much more time, another thing we wanted to do, you know, we probably in CATS lose sight of all of the articles that we see in the industry, and all of a lot of the issues we face here in Charlotte. These are industry issues, right? A lot of transit agencies are looking for ways for solutions or innovations. So we wanted to start providing you just a sampling of some of the articles that we think are relevant to issues here in Charlotte, and we'll do that as they come out and just make them available. Not officially part of the agenda, but just something we wanted to provide you.
Thank you. Any other closing comments from anybody? All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Anyone second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Issues here in Charlotte, and we'll do that as they come out and just make them available. Not officially part of the agenda, but just something we wanted to provide you.
Any other closing comments from anybody? All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.